Hello everyone, Bag here, and welcome to Civil Wolf 999's complete guide and teammate tier list. Here we'll go through everything you'd want to know about the main anniversary unit. Timestamps are available for you to jump around with, and with that, let's get into things. Civil Wolf 999, or Super Wolf, is a 5-star imaginary elation carry with a rather complicated kit that ends up being played relatively simply. To start off, her basic attack and skill are about as simple as you can get, with the skill giving 5 punchline in an AoE hit. Instead, the main thing to talk about is Super Wolf's unique ult gauge. Instead of normal energy, she instead works off of hidden MMR points. She needs 60 of these points to use her ultimate, but can overcap by an additional 240. She naturally starts with 0 and gains 1 point for every point of punchline generated from any source. Every point of hidden MMR also gives 0.4 crit rate, or 0.8 crit damage if her crit rate is already above 100%. The other main ways to gain hidden MMR is through A, her elation skill, which generates 15 points while not dealing any actual damage, and B, her second trace, which gives 20 or 40 points when Aha uses 20 or 40 punchline in their turn. This is not a scale, but rather a hard cutoff. If Aha uses 39 points in a turn, Super Wolf will still only get 20 points from that turn. This also does work off of Yao Guang and DMC, giving an effective 20 punchline elation skill within their ultimates. And as such, giving Super Wolf elation skills is by far the fastest way to get her into her ultimate, since we combine utilizing this trace and giving her an elation skill. Okay, but what is this ultimate? Ulting with Super Wolf consumes 60 hidden MMR, but her third trace gives back 20, and her signature also gives back another 20, meaning it's actually only minus 20 to 40. Entering into this ultimate is similar to with Rappa, where she gets an 100% action advance that then leads into a 3-turn enhanced state, where each turn Super Wolf is forced to use her enhanced basic attack. This enhanced basic attack consists of 100 bounces against random enemies, and during these 100 bounces, Super Wolf sends out 3 top loot boxes. This is a semi-random attack that starts as a hit of elation damage that's split evenly amongst all enemies, where it then gains one of 3 properties. If the loot box is a bomb, the attack recovers 2 skill points. If the loot is a Pac-Man, the team gains 3 punchline. And if the loot is a sword, then this attack deals 20% additional true damage to the highest HP enemy, similar to how Chibi's E1 works. As I mentioned, which one you get out of these 3 is not entirely random, as you will get the skill point bomb more often when at low SP, and the Pac-Man more often when at low ult charge, with these rates instead decreasing when at high SP or charge. Anyways, so Super Wolf does these 100 bounces and 3 loot box attacks, and then ends the enhanced basic with a big hit of damage that is also split evenly amongst all enemies. This entire enhanced basic also has a stacking flat 15% extra damage multiplier when reaching 60 or 120 hidden MMR. So due to this and the free crit hidden MMR gives, you are incentivized to continue stacking her ult charge during her ult to ramp up her damage more and more. This enhanced basic will also continue if all enemies in the wave are defeated, picking up where it left off immediately when the next wave spawns. During these 3 turns in her enhanced state, Super Wolf deploys a field. This field doesn't give any actual buffs, but rather it allows her team to generate those top loot boxes that I talked about earlier by themselves. When a teammate uses skill points, they have a chance of triggering the 3 possible loots. It starts at an 100% chance, before then reducing the chance by 1/5 for each loot box triggered. So from 100 to 20, from 20 to 4, and then from 4 to 0.8. This chance is reset back to 100% when Super Wolf uses her elation skill. During these 3 turns in her ult form, Super Wolf gains an enhanced elation skill, which is just a very simple 6 bounce attacks of elation damage. This creates an interesting balancing act where giving Super Wolf elation skills means either damage or more ult charge, as when Super Wolf's third turn in her ult state ends, she loses all hidden MMR, and must start from scratch generating another 60 to get back into her ult. So that ramp up of ult charge that I mentioned ends after her third ult turn, which also means you can't exactly rely on the free crit rate to entirely patch up her ratio, since you're forced to start with a relatively small amount of hidden MMR before ramping back up. For some other things to note about her enhanced state, for 1, she is immune to CC, and for 2, her talent gives her basic attack and skill elation scalings while she has certified banger, while also converting her enhanced basic attack's skill multipliers directly to equal elation scalings. So unlike Sparksy or Evanescia, who have tangible non-elation damage, Super Wolf's only non-elation damage is the small amount from her skill when outside of her ult state. Everything else is 100% elation damage. For minor traces, she gets a lot of speed, a lot of crit rate, and a bit of elation percent. Her base speed and speed traces leads to a very strong start of 119 speed, which is important since her first trace is a speed to elation conversion, giving her 50% elation when reaching over 160 speed, as well as 2% elation for every 1 speed over 160 up to a cap of 260 speed. We'll talk more about what this means means for her gearing in the, well, gearing section, but this does create a unit that is a bit awkward to fully buff. Her second and third traces we already talked about, meaning the last thing to go over is her technique, which is an insta-kill technique like Acheron or Finons. Starting combat with it active also gives 1 free Pac-Man, so 3 punchline and some damage, at the start of every wave. Oh, wait a minute, that isn't the last thing to go over, as, yeah, she has a global passive. If Superwolf is on your account, you get a once per wave crowd control cleanse. Yes, it's once per wave instead of once per battle like Castrus's. I'm not really gonna talk about this anymore in this video, but it's here and it exists, so hooray! For leveling priority, everything is very important to Max here, except I guess her skill. You can leave that at a low level if you want to. As for how to play Superwolf, as mentioned before, there is a lot going on with her kit, but actually playing it can be pretty binary. It's a rotation of getting her into her ult state as fast as possible, burning through her 3 enhanced basics, and then repeating the process. Everything during her turn in the enhanced basic is fully automatic. There's nothing to aim or target, so instead, the decision making is with the rest of the team. As mentioned before, perhaps the biggest decision to make with Superwolf is how to divvy up your team's ult charge generation between in and outside of her ultimate. Giving her relation skills within her ultimate means more hits of damage, while getting closer to buffing her enhanced basic if you can reach 60 or 120 points before each of her turns. While outside of her ult, elation skills contribute to minimizing her ult downtime. Firstly, there's a few things to consider. For one, her unenhanced elation skill doesn't actually deal any damage. So while a 40 punchline AHA turn almost completely charges Superwolf's ult by itself, any punchline above 40 is flat out wasted for her. There's also very little to gain from overcapping her ult before ulting, besides starting out with more ult charge at the start of her ult. So generally, it's better to only use what's needed to get her into her ult form. Like, you shouldn't use both EMC and Yao Guang's ult if only one of them is needed, since the other one could be used to give her an enhanced elation skill after she ults. To minimize wasted action value after she exits her ult, you should plan ahead your team's resources to get her to 60 as fast as needed. Saving a Yao Guang ult for a turn might be worth it if it means Superwolf doesn't waste half a cycle doing nothing. You should always be looking ahead to the action bar to see what the situation will be like when she exits her ult. What ults will you have by then? Is there an AHA turn close by? How long would you have to hold an ult to charge her back up? And would that even be needed? Every Superwolf turn uses about 50 to 60 action value, meaning a complete Superwolf ult from start to finish takes 100 to 120 action value since her first turn is from an 100% action advance. So if you have, say, 150 action value left in the fight when Superwolf enter ult, then that gives you a rough idea of how long you have to charge your ult before you start missing enhanced basic turns. If the allotted action value left isn't strict with how many turns Superwolf will end up with, then depending on the fight, it could be good to use resources before her ult ends to get more damage out. Like for example, wasting energy holding onto a Yao Guang ult might not be needed if a 40 punchline AHA turn is coming in time after Superwolf's ult ends. In this, it's good to keep in mind what each of her allies can give her, although this will be talked about more in the build section. With Yao Guang on the team, Superwolf starts with 9 ult charge, 6 from both of their techniques, and another 3 since AHA gives 1 punchline per elation teammate when combat starts and after every AHA turn. From there, Yao Guang gives 43, EMC ult gives 40, Sparksy ult gives 10, Sparksy's turn gives a variable amount but an average would be from 14 to 17, plus an extra 3 from any Pac-Mans that she might proc, and natural AHA turns can give 18, 38, or 58 depending on how much punchline is being considered in that turn. E1 Yao Guang also gives 63 ult charge, so if you have that, then yeah, she's kinda cracked here. When getting Superwolf's ult, a very important tip is that you can use auto battle to instantly get into the ult without wasting action value. This is mostly applicable to the small amount of punchline that you get per elation teammate after every AHA turn, as without auto battle, you just can't click her ult fast enough before wasting action value otherwise. Superwolf is also similar to Finon in having basically only split or bounce damage, which means a lot of her total damage can be wasted if there are enemy health bars that you don't care about depleting. This is also true for Sparksy, so it's more so something that they both deal with here, but as a general rule, if you can whittle down the enemy count to only health bars that you care about, then Superwolf's damage will be much better utilized. And the last of my miscellaneous tips here is that you can buffer things in front of Superwolf's initial 100% action advance. So say you have an ult from EMC or Yao Guang ready, with Superwolf already at enough charge to ult. Superwolf gets into her ultimate, but her first turn is not instant, and you can quickly use the ally ultimate to instantly get an enhanced elation skill while getting hidden MMR points, letting letting you apply her ramp up buffs to her first turn without wasting any elation skills, including maybe getting to the 60 hidden MMR threshold for buffing her enhanced basic attack. Ultimately, Superwolf is someone without too high of a ceiling for optimization, and she will also be a lot easier to play during elation shilling, where she gets a lot of free punchline to work off of that can ultimately make her all rotation and ult charge ramp up feel much more comfortable. But either way, there is a good amount of decision making in how to use the team's resources correctly with her, so learning the flow of her core will be the most important thing to get the most out of her. A plug here to subscribe. A teammate tier list plus guide for EMC will be out within the next few days, so if you'd like to see that for them or any future unit, then sub to stick around. Alright, back to the vid. Superwolf's sets are very simple. For main sets, it's the DPS elation set, and there's really nothing else close. For Planars, you can go Punk Lord, and nothing else is really close either. For stats, things are again super simple. Due to having a speed conversion for elation damage, B, 0 non-elation damage in her kit, and C, special energy instead of normal energy, she literally only wants crit and speed, nothing else. So crit body, speed boots, and tank stats for the orb and rope are what you should be aiming for. The substats for the planar pieces are what matter for the pieces instead of the main stats, which at least will make her easier to farm for. Due to her talent, you don't really need to worry about getting an optimal crit ratio on the stat screen. I would say just to get close-ish to 100, just so you still have a good amount of crit at the start of her ult when you don't have a lot of her ult charge, but it's not as strict as it usually is for a carry, and speed will instead be the main stat that has much more demanding thresholds. For that speed, with speed boots, she will have a base of 144 without her S1, or 163 with her S1. The obvious threshold to reach is 200 speed, for getting 3 turns in 150 action value. Although that number is not all-encompassing, due to her 100% action advance to get into her ult. You would need to get 60 ult charge before or on her first turn to keep her from needing more than 200 speed to get her entire ult off within the first wave's first cycle. To get it by Superwolf's turn, all you need is a Yao Guang ult, but you prefer to get it before her turn, both to not waste a turn of certified banger, and so that you can use Von Wek on Yao Guang to pull Superwolf's ult further ahead in the action bar, which will at least matter a lot more in modes outside of MOC, where every action value matters. To do that, you either need E1 Yao Guang, an EMC ult, which would be overkill and kinda wasted, or more likely external punchline sources, which will be abundant while we are in the middle of elation shilling. If we can't get Superwolf's ult before her first turn, 3 ult turns in the first wave of MOC is not really feasible, while 200 speed probably also won't help you for 4 ult turns in the second wave, since for every ult past her first ult, it's inevitable that you will bleed some action value between ults, unless if you can just instantly get her 60 ult charge every time, which again isn't the most feasible thing in the world without the aforementioned funnelers or external stage mechanics that can give heaps of punchline. So while 200 is the golden number, without a heavily optimized run, the only guaranteed extra turn is within the first wave's first cycle of MOC, and even then that relies on a very fast or Von Whacked Yao Guang who can get a turn 1 ult for herself. Instead, getting to 200 speed is just nice to be further ahead of other speed thresholds, such as an effective 180 speed getting you 9 turns in ANOM. Now, without her signature, 200 speed is incredibly unrealistic, and even with her S1, it'll still be iffy to hit while still having a decent baseline level of crit, unless if you have really good relics. Although something like Huoho E1 or Yao Guang E2 can help, in return for there not really being any DDD users within her standard core. I would say aiming for around 180 speed is a good start, but 200-ish will be the fully min-max goal that will be hard to optimize for. Although at least dropping crit stats will be easier to deal with all the free crit in her kit. So besides that nebulous 180 to 200-ish speed, that will of course be slightly lower without her signature, and a standard if not slightly scuffed crit line that can be saved by her talent, she doesn't really care about any other stats, making it pretty easy to know what to gear for here. For Lycones, there are 4 main choices. There's the new 4-star event Lycone, which, I mean it's usable, but it is worse than might go Mushishumi's Adventure, which has single-handedly saved Elation from not having Remembrance's Lycone problem. In fact, while the Battle Pass option is the best general option at higher super positions, Mushishumi is still an entirely viable option if you don't want to spend $50 and 5 patches getting this. Beyond that, there's her signature, which gives a huge 18% speed, 20% elation def ignore, and 20 punchline when entering her ultimate. The main interesting thing here is the 18% speed. As we mentioned earlier, this makes the realm of 200-ish speed much more attainable, while making her generally easier to build for lower thresholds as well. It's kinda like with Cypher Sig, where this extra speed frees her up to build other stats while staying on her wanted level of speed, while also allowing her to reach a new threshold of speed if she wants to. Except here, it's a carry, meaning both getting more turns and freeing up her stats are both much more important here. If trying to reach specific nebulous speed thresholds and squeezing out an extra turn or 2 in a run isn't that appealing to you, you, then this Lycone is more just a good stat stick rather than something that's needed, especially with how perfectly usable her alternatives are. Now for her teams. Oh boy. Yeah, so I'm combining my formatting of how I usually do these videos. So welcome to Superwolf's teammate tier list. It'll be a bit condensed here for the sake of the video's pacing and because I'm not trying to repeat information, but alright, let's see who she wants on her team to succeed. First off, there's the unit who is seemingly designed around her, Sparksy. Sparksy fits right in here as a dual DPS partner as a funneler of Superwolf's mechanics. For one, she is the best in the game in terms of raw punchline generation. And while she is outclassed in terms of raw ult generation for Superwolf, no one beats her in terms of actual punchline that both buffs their elation skills while also making it much more feasible to get high punchline aha turns without relying on elation shilling. Sparksy is also really the only unit in the game that can consistently proc 2 to 3 mystery boxes from Superwolf per turn, as each use of her skill rolls that dice, meaning she needs to hit the 20% chance for 2 boxes and then a 4% chance for 3 boxes, which is not impossible to expect with the amount of tries that she gets per turn, with all of those extra mystery boxes resulting in more damage, punchline, and SP. Sparksy also gets her second trace maxed out here, meaning her ult gives an entire 4 thrill and 10 punchline. This all adds up to mean that her primary role as a skill spamming nuker isn't really compromised in this dual DPS team. It's just that half of her buffing is replaced by another synergistic damage dealer. Really though, besides the baseline synergies within their kits, Sparksy's strong personal damage also just carries a lot of her utility here. There are other teammates that can fill her spot in supporting Superwolf just fine, but she will always have an advantage over her competition just due to how much her damage can contribute. Sparksy is very easily an S tier teammate. Let's move on. Now we get to the more controversial teammate, Yaguang. Yaguang is very strong here due to 2 factors, her ult charge funneling and her team-wide utility. With how important Sparksy and Superwolf's damage contributions are here, buffing both of them while giving both of them elation skills with every one of her ults is really great. The thing is, Superwolf basically needs some sort of ult charge funneling in her team to be able to function without heavily relying on elation shilling, and while that ult funneling role is not exclusive to Yaguang, she is the best in doing so, in a large part due to not compromising any of her support to also fully provide for Sparksy. Fulfilling this niche does more than just make Superwolf functional, as ulting with Yaguang during Superwolf's ult is a giant boost in damage as well, as Superwolf's elation skill is very strong, and the ult charge contributes towards getting her more crit from her talent. Actually, before we go any further, I think it'll be a good idea to bring in the full comparison early and talk about EMC here too, as how dominant Yaguang is also depends on how close her competition is. If you don't know, EMC is essentially a budget diet Yaguang, with an ult that, for our purposes here, acts as a single target Yaguang ult, giving buffs and an elation skill to one ally. So for Superwolf, EMC can do a very good job in supplementing Yaguang's role, with the ult giving only 3 less punchline due to it not actually triggering an aha instant, although they do give an extra 3 charge to Yaguang's ult when used together, so that's a nice plus, with a minus being the slightly lower certified banger generation for Superwolf compared to Yaguang, on top of, you know, having worse buffing as well. The main trouble with EMC as the primary support here is that they completely screw over Sparksy. She does still get her second trace, but she doesn't get the vast majority of EMC's buffing, she does less elation skills, gets less thrill, less certified banger, and less SP. You can try and juggle EMC's buffs between these 2 carries, but with how fast Superwolf goes, she'll be pretty demanding and needing constant support. Basically, if you are using EMC instead of Yaguang, then Sparksy does a lot worse at her job. But other than Yaguang, there just doesn't really exist a great option to support both of these carries. When replacing EMC with anyone else means Superwolf will have terrible ult charge generation. If you are losing one of the 2 4.0 units, then an EMC Yaguang core for Superwolf will just be a lot better, as Superwolf is strong enough as a carry to not entirely rely on Sparksy to perform at a high level. If we then don't have Sparksy, then replacing Yaguang with EMC is a lot less bad. So then a full budget team can exist with Superwolf, EMC, and a filler option. This can be a generic buffer in the same sense as they work with Sparksy, in that as long as their buffs don't rely on damage percent or attack, then they'll be as functional as ever. You can also add Nova Flared Welt to this list at E4+, as pre-E4 his elation buffing is like Pela level, but he can be a great option for a pseudo-sustainless run with his slows. You can also go Asta. She gives 52 speed with her ult, and can hold DDD. That's 104% elation, as well as possibly giving her multiple extra turns over the course of the fight. That's not bad. Not amazing, but not bad. Another generally recommendable filler option is Sparkle. As with Superwolf being faster than her, it's still pretty easy to make use of her 50% action advance every turn, which helps in burning through the 3 turns in her ultimate much more quickly. And when Superwolf doesn't need the advance, you can instead advance your EMC to expedite their ult rotation. You also get DDD, solid damage amp even when wasting the attack, as well as the SP cap, SP generation, and the attack to Sparksy if she is somewhere on the team. A full filler team can still clear, especially when going sustainless if you can, but the basic recommendation is to have at least one of either Sparksy or Yao Guang, and between them, Yao Guang is the better unit to have first. I will say though, Sparksy will be more important when we are no longer in Elation Shilling, as again, Yao Guang and EMC don't actually give a lot of punchline, so when we don't have a bunch of enemies giving a ton of free punchline, then Sparksy's raw generation will be much more coveted. Lastly, there are the sustains, of which the only real notable option is, of course, Ho-Ho. She's not really doing anything at all for Superwolf herself, but she provides a hefty attack buff to Sparksy, and more importantly, energy to EMC and or Yao Guang, and also energy to Sparksy. That alone is a difference maker here, as no other support can really match that utility. Dipped is especially shaky with Superwolf, as not only is Superwolf not an attack scaler, but she also has terrible base attack, which Soul Dragon still uses to scale with its attacks. You can still just make Sparksy the bond mate, and he is still great for actually sustaining hard fights, but when she is usable, Ho-Ho still heavily outclasses him. Hyacinth is also a very nice comfortable sustain here, but I'm specifically mentioning her over the other generic sustains to note that her E2 is really good here if you have it, being one of the largest speed buffs in the entire game. Overall, Superwolf does have some assumed investment to be fully worth it as a new carry. To summarize, Yao Guang EMC is a good enough core, Sparksy is a good upgrade over EMC, and if you don't have Yao Guang, then EMC Sparksy is good enough, but you really should get Yao Guang here eventually. Lastly, we have her Eidolons. Her E1 gives a 20% vulnerability to her zone, as well as refunding 20% of her hidden MMR when leaving her ult, instead of resetting it down to 0. The vulnerability is a very simple but very solid damage amp, although it will be a bit saturated with Yao Guang, EMC if they're on the team, and any mushy shroomies that you have. Meanwhile, that 20% refund is extremely hard to quantify. To get an instant back-to-back ult from this refund, you would literally need to hit the cap of 300 hidden MMR by the time her ult ends, which is nowhere near even remotely possible outside of very, very heavy Elation Shilling. So instead, this serves as a small damage amp for every ult past her first one, while also still lowering the requirement of getting back into her ult by some non-negligible amount. It's a solid Eidolon overall, but not some centralizing force that is hard to miss. An important piece about her E1, however, is that it gets her closer to her E2. This E2 extends all buffs on Superwolf when entering her ultimate, and when reaching 120 or 240 MMR points, Superwolf gets an immediate extra turn with an extra use of her enhanced basic attack. The extension of buffs is mostly just a nice buff for her certified banger uptime, which is a large help for her enhanced basic damage. But yeah, extra turns is fine on E2 territory, which is always exciting. Except here, the iffy thing is actually getting to 240 hidden MMR within an ult. Generally, it's not possible to get to 240 hidden MMR without extensive external help from Elation Shilling. If we start at 20 hidden MMR and give 2 Yao Guang ults, 2 Yao Guang basics, 2 40 punchline AHA turns, 2 Sparksy ults, 2 15 punchline Sparksy turns, and 4 Pac-Mans, we would still just barely be off. And this is already an extremely unrealistic scenario in multiple facets. This is partly due to AHA and Yao Guang giving less charge while Superwolf is in her ult, due to not using her unenhanced Elation skill. But really, Superwolf is just not built to ramp up this much by herself. As such, this can be eased up with external vertical investment, like Yao Guang's E1, or Sparksy's E2, or her own S1. But I struggle to recommend this as an actual solution with how expensive that all is. And since even with all that investment, getting to 240 can still be a bit tight without 2 Yao Guang ults, especially if you go E2 S0 before getting Superwolf's S1. Overall, Yao Guang E1 is what I would recommend for the team first. Then, it depends on how much you're pulling. If you already have the means to support it, gunning for E2 is the play. If you don't, then I would just stick to S1, especially since its Death Shred scales well with Yao Guang's E1 alongside Superwolf's Relic set, as opposed to her E1's vulnerability being diluted as we mentioned earlier. After her S1, Sparksy's E2 would be the next thing I would recommend investing in on her next rerun, where afterwards E2 would be fully supported and is worth going for next. Of course, this is all out of order due to everyone not running at the same time, but you get the general idea of investment priorities, so plan ahead with what you think you'll end up going for in the future when deciding on what to get Superwolf now. I will also clarify that her E2 is still pretty good even without hitting 240 hidden MMR. It's just not as much of a high priority target over other options in that scenario, which works out fine when going for those other targets first, then also helps her E2 get stronger anyways. I also want to say, do not worry about this investment if you don't have the means to get it. None of this high investment is required for her to perform well at a high level, especially while we're in Elation Shilling, but the team core overall does have pretty good vertical investment, so if you want this team to excel even more on your account, then this is the priority I would recommend. Moving on, her E4 causes her Elation skill to quintuple the amount of punchline that it uses. Even if this is just for her Elation skill, this is is still not a bad Eidolon at all, especially for the standards of an E4. Finally, her E6 gives 50% Merry Make, which is essentially just a 1.5 times damage multiplier to her enhanced basic attack, while also implanting all enemies with absolute weakness. On top of making enemies take toughness damage from any element, this also sets all resisted elements to have 0 res, while setting all elements already at 0 res to minus 20% instead. Essentially, it's 20 res pen, but it will be more strong if they resist an element that you care about by more than 20. It's an E6 that's just a raw damage amp, but the damage amp is not bad by any means, and the absolute weakness helps smooth over any awkwardness that comes from having a dual TBS teammate with a different element. Outside of high imaginary or fire res fights, wherein this Eidolon is insane, this is otherwise a thoroughly good Eidolon. Again, not something that I would actually ever recommend going for, but I think you get that by now. And that's everything. Going to the channel member corner, just to say that I appreciate every single one of you as always. And with that, sub to see the EMC guide coming out soon. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye!